Ukraine has a very complex history. It's as a state, and again, I might be not accurate there. So it throughout the history, it always kind of changed sides. It was always torn apart, between the West and the East. So historically, of course, it has very strong cultural bonds with Russia. Actually, Kiev, the capital of Ukraine now, was historically the capital of Russia. Well, kind of back in the day, so in the medieval ages. But so the culture is very strong. But Ukraine again was always, for the most part of its history, was always kind of torn apart by this infighting. So they would side with Poland at some point in time. They would fight on the Sweden side against Russia, and then in other years they would, in other periods, they would switch to kind of Russian side. So it's very complex. So Ukraine was always it was always a polarized country that never had unity in the sense where it wants to go. So I guess the most recent events come from around World War II, when prior to World War II, there were what is now Ukraine used to consist of two parts. One was Western Ukraine, which was very pro-Western and anti-communist. And then there was the eastern part of Ukraine. Most of the Ukraine was was made very pro-socialist and very pro-communist, pro-Soviet Union. Okay, and then in 1939, when this Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was secretly signed, they kind of divided the territory between Germany and Russia. So basically, Poland went to Germany, all the Baltic republics went to the Soviet Union, and so the Western Ukraine was annexed by the Soviet troops, that was liberated, as Soviets like to say. Well, and they became part of the Ukraine. And for years and years, there were these two poles. So one was very pro-Western and anti-Russia because Russia in many minds was associated with communism and socialism. So and another one was kind of pro-Russian. And again, it is also reflected in what languages are spoken. While the Eastern Ukraine, especially the far eastern, the easternmost parts of Ukraine, they have 80% of people speak Russian, but in Western Ukraine, speaking Russian, you can actually, if you're not careful, you can get abused there. So anyway, so it's very polarized, and the capital Kiev is kind of 50-50, and so now to this tension existed for years. So when the previous president of Ukraine, Yushchenko, was elected, it was, that was the so-called Orange Revolution in Ukraine. So there was hope among all the people that, this is a glimpse of democracy. But unfortunately what happened, Yushchenko, unfortunately it's actually true about the entire Eastern Europe. So in fact, I think it's largely true, to a large extent true about Russia. So people try to get, into politics just to get, a grip on a larger portion of, former state property and stuff like that. So it's, so anyway, Yushchenko, what he did, he just replaced all the officials with his, kind of friends and buddies, people loyal to him. And so really the economy of Ukraine, or really this, democratic elections didn't do much for the economy of Ukraine. So how it always happens, in any country, including the United States, people like one party comes to power and people are still not happy, so they elect the other party, and then they're not happy with that, and so it goes back and forth. So in Ukraine, I think it was similar. So Yanukovych, the latest last president, was very pro-Russia, and he was largely in favor of stronger ties with Russia. So but he is also a shady, like a very murky figure. So he has some criminal past. I mean, petty crimes. But again, he's not a pleasant man either. So I guess I don't know why there was not a better candidate. Anyway, so they So yeah, what happened? Of course, as you know, what triggered the events was when Ukraine was considering whether to be closer to the European Union and kind of move in that direction. I think their Rada, basically their parliament, voted in favor of that, but Yanukovych used the power of veto to kind of overrule that. And the main reason was actually, I think, pure economics, because Russia gave them, or committed at least, to a larger aid package than European Union was able to. And and again, I mentioned earlier that Ukrainian economy is not doing very well. So there is no sound economic policies there, and so the government budget is kind of crumbling, and so they really need that. They still need that financial aid, and so Russia was able to offer them a more generous packet, and so I think that was the reason. Well, in addition to his general sentiment towards Russia, that was an important part of the reason he went that way, and that's when people took it to streets. Because they felt that's not undemocratic. Because for an Eastern European, being part of Europe is kind of like a bliss. So it's like, because that's where they always look in that direction. So I understand that part. But so anyway, that's what, in my opinion, that's what triggered these events, and and again, this was going for more than a month. And there was some gradually there was escalating violence and on both sides, and so eventually it led to this crisis. And I don't know really how far we want to go. Whether it would be better if you kind of guide me by questions. Yeah. But so anyway, that's a prehistory of this event. That's what led to those events. But we can talk about the current situation. But anyway, I better pause because I tend to babble. So it's I'll let you maybe ask more specific questions. So.
Okay. Just kind of off the top of my head, since I have a pretty good background and a lot of explanation of just kind of leading up to a lot of this, would you consider this to be kind of more? I don't know, would it be closer to like a civil war, or kind of more of an invasion?
I would say at this point it's neither. It can turn into one of the two, or it may not. It doesn't have to. So the only thing that happened so far, so basically there was, we can call it a revolution, right? So when people, kind of overthrown the president, so at least expressed their displeasure and dissatisfaction with the current president, and they passed a few laws that they slightly changed the constitution slightly, but much will depend on whether how the new the group of people who are in power right now, and the push, of course, came again. It's kind of the pendulum swung in the other direction. Yeah. So the push came from the western Ukraine mainly. So it depends on how they treat the regions of Ukraine that are very populated by ethnical Russian people. So if they conduct wise policies toward them, and because in fact when all this started, one of the kind of arguments or demands of this of those protesters was that there is too much power concentrated in the hands of the president, and the local governments, the local municipalities don't have the power to kind of conduct their own policies. So, you know, and again, so basically this group of people, well, protesters, let's call it this way, so they actually came to power under, this was one of their slogans, right? So, and if they are consistent, and if they say that, okay, well, we're not trying to impose, you know, I don't know, our Western Ukrainian values onto these regions, well, then I think, yeah, I mean, I still think that there is a good chance of everything ending peacefully. I mean, there are some, you know, every day there are news about, well, someone is taking over, well, some government building and then leaving that, vacating that government building. So it's, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's again, it's hard to read to predict the future. But I mean, so they want, they want it to be in power, and they want to have their own, you know, people in the key positions. But you know, if that is the case, so then it's not in their interest to start to initiate the civil war, right? I mean, because civil war, I mean, everything that will destroy the economy completely, which is not doing so well so far. So, so that's the civil war question. Now, as far as invasion, it's, and I assume you're referring to Russia, the Russian decision to, well, you see, so far, again, on the, as far as the laws that were passed by the Russian parliament, all that happened is the parliament, the Duma, gave the president the right to make decisions, well, to make decisions to send troops to Ukraine, you know, without the need to run it by the parliament.
Yeah.
So they gave him the kind of carte blanche. But you know, so far, I mean, look, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there are conflicting information, but I think what we see in Crimea, on the Crimea Peninsula, is mainly they're just, you know, flexing some muscles, showing that, yeah, we have on that, there is a military base, and they signed this agreement. I think it is well, according to the standing agreements, I think it can, I don't remember the exact date, but I think it's at least 2040. So Ukraine, you know, in a democratic country, you know, a new government, you know, unless it's like an extremely, well, it's an extremist kind of like coup. So, I mean, you don't change policies like that. So, I mean, if a legitimate president, a legitimate prime minister signed this, so it should stay. So, but, you know, so I think what we see, the picture that we see from the streets of Sevastopol in Ukraine, where the military base is, so I think they're just, you know, the personnel that it was already there. But again, I don't have the information. I mean, if I see convincing facts that it's otherwise, Russia is actually sending additional troops there, I may change my mind. But so far, I haven't seen that. So I think it's too early to think to talk about invasion. But I mean, we can only talk about the possibility of invasion. And I think, you know, it's well, I teach a course on game theory, and in game theory, you know, I remember the times when there was this nuclear standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union, and you know, the only reason it didn't turn into a full-blown conflict is because each country showed convincingly that it's committed to go full force, you know, if necessary. So, and that again, brinkmanship is kind of that would prevent from the conflict from exploding. So, in my opinion, so what Russia has done so far, they just try to send a strong signal, because if they would sit on the sidelines, you know, then who knows? Because to be honest, I mean, some of the people or some of the like crowds like that are behind these protesting movements, they are outright scary, and you know, do not know how far they would go, because I mean, if they are driven by hatred, you know, so I mean, bad things happen.
Yeah.
So it's making this move, kind of basically what they're saying is, well, look, I mein, if you really lose control of the situation, well, we'll have to interfere. So far, again, I may be painting Russia kind of in pink and royal, fuzzy, but it's cuddly. But it's well, maybe it's not the case. But again, so far, yeah, that's all they did. They showed the commitment to protecting or interfering in the situation or interfering in order to normalize the situation as if necessary. And again, sorry, I'm giving you these long-winded answers to these simple questions, but some people compared that to the situation in Abkhazia and North Ossetia in 2008.
Yeah.
I think there is a lot of similarities there. I think that, and it's a dangerous thing to say, but yeah, I'll say it anyway. So I think the situation in North Ossetia and Abkhazia were, I do believe that they may have been premeditated by Russians. So that basically their local population, which was kind of Russia oriented, I do believe that they might have provoked the Georgian forces so that Russians can come in. In Ukraine, I mean, I think that part, I don't think it's true. I don't believe that Russia really premeditated these riots by the Western Ukrainians. So that, I mean, clearly the push comes from there. But if it comes to, on the surface, right? I mean, if Russia enters, so then yes, it will look like North Ossetia. But again, the background, I think is different. So, okay, so Russia was less innocent in North Ossetia and Georgia back in 2008 than it would be now if it ever enters. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, actually, that was actually one of my other questions. So,
yeah, there are strong analogies, but again, you have to understand the background and what led to these events, right? So because yeah, that situation with North Ossetia was kind of shady, but here I don't think Russia did anything to really stir the emotions or stir the conflict. So really, I mean, I don't think so. I mean, Russia is not too happy with Yanukovych but I don't know why Ukraine didn't have a better candidate. It's a question. It's just, I don't know, blows my mind. I don't know. So.
Well, since Putin seems to be willing to step in on behalf of the international community, what do you feel about the other nations? Like, if they should be involved, or what they are doing?
Honestly, I would like them to be involved because, well, okay, imagine, and we can't dismiss that as a possibility. Imagine Russia is acting purely from the humanitarian motives. Imagine that. Okay. So and they put their troops in the streets just to prevent casualties among civilians. Okay. So someone somewhere would always say that okay, that's the invasion, and well, so Russia is trying to take over an independent country. I would feel much better if there would be, if the tensions escalate and it would get close to civil war. I would like to see a joint peacekeeping forces. Be that European Union, like NATO, United States. Yeah, I mean Russia can be part of it and probably will be part of it. But it's I would be much more comfortable with that scenario because, well, I don't think Russia really, I mean, I understand why it wants to protect, well, the Russian population simply because, well, they're kind of looking up to the Russian Federation, kind of hoping that if things get really bad, that Russian Federation would protect them. But again, I would like to see it happen in a civilized way, and I don't mind. I don't think actually Russian Federation doesn't want to be labeled as a villain, right? I mean, so I think that in the end, no one wants a war in Ukraine. I mean, I don't think anyone benefits from that. So I think if there is enough strong presence, like United States played this role, well, kind of throughout the history on several different occasions, but I'm much more comfortable when there's, like, as I said, joint peacekeeping forces. I hope that maybe United Nations would kind of step in and kind of be able to coordinate who goes where and how how the responsibilities are shared. Because, well, I mean, after all, again, kind of it's a digression, but after all, I think that the events in Syria that actually didn't lead to military conflict and kind of led to more or less peaceful resolution of this issue. Actually, they showed that United Nations actually can. I mean, you know, many people already wrote off United Nations as like, okay, it's completely useless, it can't do anything. But you know, I think that's an example that it's still an organization that can actually do something. So it's yeah, I would. I'm sorry. I know I tend to talk a lot and go in circles, but I think that well, yes, I would very much like. I would be so much more comfortable than when a group of countries send their troops there rather than just Russia. Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, just since we're in the United States and everything, and it's always kind of a good idea to ask this. How do you think a lot of like the movement that's happening in Ukraine could possibly affect our relationship with them economically or politically, or would it have any effect at all, or you know, if we have enough of a relationship with them for it to actually be affected?
Again, it's hard to tell. Well, it's I think, let's say, imagine tomorrow all the riots, all the tension subsides, and will United States be more comfortable dealing with this, with the present elite or whatever, political elite in Ukraine, if we can actually define it?
Yeah.
I think so. Yes, I think. The problem with Yanukovych was that, well, first he was more pro-Russian than pro-Western, and second, he was very unpredictable and he wasn't a very smart person. He isn't a very smart person. So it's hard to deal with him, and I think the present, the group that is in power right now, I think, they do want a good relationship with the United States and Europe. So it's that's the whole reason that actually this whole thing started. So there is goodwill on the present, on the side of the present political elite in Ukraine. But again, in order for that to be possible, well, again, someone in the world has to ensure that there is no civil war. You know, so because if the country is at war, you know, it's always like one half will always blame the United States and another half will always blame this Russian Federation. So no one needs that. So if the country stays united, I mean, it will take probably, well, I don't know, at least a couple of months before everything kind of settles down and they establish kind of the new rules of the game. I think, I think Ukraine took a step towards better relationship with the West, yes. As I said, when the dust settles, if it settles like at the current situation, so it's then, it's a step forward. In fact, I guess it would be easier to talk about this when we maybe not necessarily have the presidential elections, right? They have the May 25th, I believe, that's the date of the next presidential election, and at least when I see the list of candidates, you know, because so far it's blurry. So. Yeah.
Saying with other countries around the region that are that used to be Soviet, do you think that what's happening in Ukraine is kind of an isolated thing, or could we maybe expect that to happen with a lot of other countries that were once previously communist?
You know, many of the countries already went through this, or kind of going this kind of, there is simmering, they have this like shaky status quo, because let's say Baltic countries, right, the three Baltic countries, when they seceded, well, they immediately took the path to the West, and everyone knew they would. Yeah. So Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, they have some tensions, but they manage to live together. I mean, they still don't like each other. So Estonians don't like the Russians who live there, even though, I mean, they need each other, because, well, they work in different sectors of the economy. But it's, Russians were initially offended that they were asked to learn the language of that country, which they didn't have in the Soviet Union. So in order to have a passport, to have citizenship. So, I think it's, again, maybe I'm a softer guy, so I would learn the language. I mean, I learned the language of this country in order to get a job there. So get here. So it's so yeah. I mean, I guess that's part of the deal. So, but anyway, so those tensions, they kind of like over the years they kind of diminished now. They, as I said, there is still kind of animosity in terms of like people don't like each other, But again, it doesn't take the form of military conflicts. Moldova is they went through like very bloody war with like Transnistria, so basically eastern part, like there's a Dnistru, the river that flows through Moldova and kind of divides it. So there is again heavily Russian populated, very like a mini Ukraine. So, and they had a really bloody war, and right now there is that region is kind of has an autonomy, and there is a lot of military presence there. And I don't know the details, I don't know the latest status of it, but it was ugly and it was very bloody, and so it's like Yugoslavia actually. So so it's not like I don't think there are any countries left that can follow Ukraine's example. In fact, Belarus is very cohesive. Simply, I don't know. I mean, in part because Lukashenko has this like kind of like firm grip on the country, but not so much because in Belarus it's I don't know, for some reason historically there were always very good relationships ethnically between people from Belarus and Russians. So, and they're not that different ethnically, and they kind of got along for years and years and years. So it's so because Belarus, we didn't annex anything to Belarus that has this like potential source of instability. So like we did in Ukraine. So I guess that's why it's all because of the events of 1939. Yep. So it's anyway. So I don't think there will be more instability. I think if anything, Ukraine is the last to kind of try to find its kind of location in this like on the map, but. And again, unfortunately, if you look at the history, throughout the history, Ukraine was going back and forth. And again, I don't expect any countries to follow this example because no country is left to follow this example. But I suspect that this may not be the end of things. This may be not the last explosive situation in Ukraine. Maybe in 10 years we'll have another one. Maybe because this. I think it's. I don't think like splitting the country into two is a good idea, but so it would be better if this country stays as one. But unfortunately, these tensions will remain. So who knows what form they will take? I think they need a better written constitution and a better written kind of system of human rights, and basically all the laws have to be well thought through. And again, that is maybe where the Western world can really help, kind of writing that. So anyway, so that's again, another long-winded answer.
Not a problem. Actually, you've got pretty much all my questions answered at this point. So I guess the only thing I really have left to ask you is, do you have any personal thoughts on the situation in Ukraine? Or,
I guess. I try to stay unbiased. I try to read the sources on both sides on the issue, on both sides of the debate. I guess I touched on most of it. I would like to see Russia to play peacekeeping role, not the role of the invader. So you always want your country, to do good, not to be again the aggressor or something. So, but naturally, I guess it's natural for me to empathize with the Russian-speaking people. Well, it's just because of the history. I grew up in the Soviet Union, so until I was 35. So, So it's that's a little growing up. So, but it's so naturally I empathize with them better. But I try to kind of believe the facts, not my feelings, but kind of follow the facts. And so again, my personal thoughts. Yeah, again, I'd like to see everything be resolved peacefully. I mean, that's my main wish, you know. And I don't care who wins or loses geopolitically, whether it will be a win for Russia. It's secondary issue. I just don't want to see innocent people kill themselves. So yeah, that's yeah. I don't know if that's personal.